Okay, so did it learn how to park? There are a few other fun videos on the same channel. For example, there's one where they took two cars that independently learned how to park, and then they tried to go against each other in going to the parking spot. So for machine learning, you have to be aware of these different categories. We talked about supervised learning, like in the example of classifying images, cat versus dog, or classifying emails, spam versus ham. We talked about unsupervised learning, where you give just a lot of data to the system. This is very often done in data mining. And then finally, reinforcement learning, an example like you've just seen for self-driving cars. So for each of these, you should know that you need different kinds of data. In supervised learning, you have labeled data, unsupervised, unlabeled data. But in reinforcement learning, you don't really have data that you give. You have to be able to give a reward based on the system trying and failing at a certain task. And for each of these categories, there are lots of different algorithms. So a few of those are shown here, again, in the three categories: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. And then in there, you can further classify it into the task you want to do, like supervised learning into classification. So again, this is like classifying images or classifying customers or classifying financial transactions, fraud or not, classifying emails, spam or not spam. So this is a very typical task. But you can also have a regression task where you want to predict a value or forecast a value. For example, predict the price for a house in a certain area. We talked about reinforcement learning. So this is typically done in game AI, but also things like navigation for robots. And you have unsupervised learning, which you can further separate into clustering and dimensionality reduction. So today we'll see brief examples for algorithms in unsupervised and supervised learning in the clustering category, in the classification category, and in the regression category. Last time, I also introduced you to this general process in machine learning. So you have to first have a data set for machine learning. You can expect you need some time for cleaning the data, for normalizing it, for doing other kinds of pre-processing. Most beginners completely underestimate that the most of the work, the largest part of the time that you spend is in this data cleaning phase. Most people think machine learning is this cool stuff you do here with the algorithms, but then in reality, you spend most of your time looking over gigabytes of bad data, incomplete data, missing data, and so on, and trying to manually clean this up with help of scripts and so on. So this just as a side note, you have the data set, you clean it. Then for the algorithms that we look at here, you have to do feature engineering, meaning you have to decide on that feature vector that you use later on in classifying the data. In the training phase, you use this data to with a specific algorithm to train your model. And then later on in production, you take this model, you take some new data coming in, you use the model to, for example, classify an image or classify an email and get the result. And we'll also talk about evaluating the model. We started talking about evaluation last time, and we'll talk a bit more in the last part later in this lecture. So to get you back up to speed, there is a quick refresher task on the worksheet, the task number 1. And once you're done with that, I'll see you for the next part, document clustering. See you then.